Hello, boys and girls, teachers, friends. I am Jamain Hatton. This is my online podcast, The Recap. Today on The Recap, we're looking at An African Thunderstorm by David Rubadiri. Today happens to be the 19th day of October in the year 2017. Before I get into today's poem, allow me to say thank you very much for all the feedback I've been getting here on the channel. Continue to like, comment, and subscribe to get more updates on exciting poems that appear in the English syllabus 2018 to 2023. Thank you very much, guys. It really, really means a lot. An African Thunderstorm is written by David Rubadiri. And who exactly is David Rubadiri? He is from an African country called Mawali. He is an academic, he's a poet, a playwright, a diplomat, a novelist, etc. He is regarded as one of Africa's most widely anthologized and celebrated poets to emerge after independence. His country, Mawali, gained independence in 1964. He became the first ambassador to the US as well as to the United Nations up until the fallout with the government in the year 1965. This poem, An African Thunderstorm, has a very popular a literal meaning that talks really about nature and the coming of a storm. I am dedicating that aspect of it to my friend in Turks and Caicos, Miss Shalane Bean. But there's also a very unpopular contextual meaning to this poem. A contextual meaning that talks about the arrival of the Western influence on this African country, Mawali. And that meaning is not really, that contextual meaning is not really examined when we look at this poem, An African Thunderstorm, but we will look at both of those meanings here today. So let's have a great poem, An African Thunderstorm, David Rubadiri. An African Thunderstorm, David Rubadiri. From the west clouds come hurrying with the wind, turning sharply here and there, like a plague of locusts, whirling, tossing up things on its tail, like a madman chasing nothing. Pregnant clouds ride stately on its back, gathering to perch on hills like dark, sinister wings. The wind whistles by, and trees bend to let it pass. In the village, screams of delighted children toss and turn. In the din of the whirling wind, women, babies clinging to their backs, dart about, in and out, madly. The wind whistles by, whilst trees bend to let it pass. Clothes wave like tattered flags, flying off to expose dangling breasts, as jagged, blinding flashes rumble, tremble, and crack, amidst the smell of fired smoke and the pelting march of the storm. Or we see a description of the storm as it gathers, it picks up momentum. And in the final stanza, we see the impact of the storm on humanity. So earlier I dedicated my poem to my friend in Turks and Caicos. We all know of the tragic storm Hurricane Irma earlier a few weeks ago, and it talks about just how destructive storms can actually be upon our friends in islands across the Caribbean. And here in African Thunderstorm, we can see just how that storm or just how storms or hurricanes can impact lives. All right. So it starts by saying, from the west, clouds come hurrying. We see a little personification there, giving the quality of human to clouds. So it's saying the clouds are hurrying with wind. So it's saying the storm is picking up wind, it's picking up momentum, it's turning sharply, the hurricane turning sharply, and it goes here, it goes there, and it says like a plague of locusts. That's a simile, of course, like simile underlines it, and it tells us really the appearance of the storm and how destructive it can be, how destructive that storm can actually be on lives and so on. All right. It says whirling, tossing up things on its tail. We know what a storm looks like as it comes with that wind. It's destructive. It can uproot things, trees, buildings, take off roofs, and so on. And it's saying like a madman chasing nothing. It's showing us just how unpredictable the storm is. Another simile there, like a madman. We know a madman would not choose what he does and so on. So it's trying to show us how unpredictable nature can be, how unpredictable the storm can be as it uproots or as it adds to the danger in surrounding places and so on. It says pregnant clouds. That's a metaphor. I'm quite sure we all know that. It's comparing the largeness of the clouds to pregnant women, and it says ride, another personification, ride stately on the back, gathering to the perch of hills, and we are seeing there, and the fact that it's building up momentum. All right, it says dark, sinister wings, and that's a very important little. So that little simile there, like dark, sinister wings, it's basically comparing the cloud or the appearance of the cloud to a bird or to a prey, and it's trying to show us that it's reminiscent of the clouds. Let me go there again. It's telling us that the clouds are reminiscent of some bird of prey waiting to strike. So sinister, some deep plot waiting to strike. And it says, winds whistle by trees, bend to let them pass. So trees bend to let them pass. And that there is personification, the saying that the trees had the ability to bend. But this is the part, all right, I'll talk about that separately. So trees bend to let them pass. It's as though the trees didn't put up any fight. The trees were just there, and as the storm approached and the wind blew, the trees just step aside and allow them to pass. So there was no resistance, there was no fight, all right? So here we see the arrival of that storm in villages, and we are seeing how people prepared for that arrival. So it starts by saying, in the village, screams of delighted children, and we see a nice little contrast there between adults and children, and it tells us just how playful children can be. Screams of delighted children. So it's a storm is about to hit, a storm that has the ability to wipe out your country or your village, cause destruction, and you are delighted to see this storm. The children are delighted, toss and turn. You know, they're anxious to see that storm in the din of the whirling wind. So the wind is as though it's fascinating them. And there they say, women, babies clinging to their backs, dart about. That dart about gives a sense of urgency. The women were desperate to get things in order just before this storm hits, just to make sure that the family is safe. All right, so it shows a little busyness, a little eager there for in the eyes of women to actually prepare for this storm madly. And I love that word madly. So they're moving madly in and out. The wind whistles by, and it says, while trees bend to let it pass. Another repetition, in fact, a repetition of the line, trees bend to let it pass, to give us a sense again that there is emphasizing the fact that there was no resistance put up by nature, there was no resistance put up by people, and as a result of that, trees bend to allow the wind to pass. It's as though they gave up. All right, and here it comes, and I don't want to go into this. I'll look at it in the next slide. It's showing us the other contextual meaning of this poem, where it's an arrival of the Western influence on African countries. So I'm just not going to touch on that too much. Let me continue with the literal nature of things here. It goes on to talk about clothes wave like tethered flags. So remember those women were hurrying to make sure things were in order just before the storm hit? Well, the storm is actually here now, and they're showing us the effect of that storm. So it took clothes and it made it appear like tethered flags, and it's flying off, meaning it's at the mercy of the winds, and it's appearing that our women did all that they did in vain, and now everything is at the mercy of this wind. So, coming down to the end, we see a set of words there that give us an idea of sounds. So, we know that would be examples of onomatopoeia. When sounds are hinted based on the word that is used, rumble, tremble, crack, what else we have? March, what else? Is there anything else? Flashes, and so on. So, good. It's telling us that the storm is really about to hit. It's not quite actually there as yet, but the storm is giving the impression that the storm cannot be stopped. So, and the pelting march of the storm, pelting march, giving us the idea the storm cannot be stopped and it will be a mighty one. But it leaves us in a bit of suspense because we are wondering what exactly happened. Was this storm a very destructive one? Did people die? What happened? We are not so sure. So the poet left us wondering what else happened, and that's we must acknowledge, we must respect the brilliance behind this poem here by David. And let's go back a little bit. It says blinding flashes. And the blinding flashes just goes to show us when we have a hurricane, and people in Caribbean will best be able to understand this. There is lightning that comes with it, and that lightning might be a rumble. It might make us tremble. It might make some boards crack. It might make our house crack. And the smell of smoke, that smell of fired smoke, is very important because it tells us that even as the storm approached, or even as it passed or about to pass us, we can still smell it, we can still anticipate it, and we're not quite sure whether it's done or if it's going to come back to haunt us. Remember earlier in the poem it says what it was unpredictable. So here we're coming back to the unpredictability, if I can say that, of that storm. So I talked about that contextual meaning earlier, and no text has really cemented this reasoning here, but there is some amount of literature that does talk about this contextual meaning. And I want you to really interpret it and tell me what you think about this aspect, because this is what poetry is about. This is what literature is about. There are many sides to things, and we must not limit it to only one thing that we can actually see without even digging deep. Like, for example, nature. Yes, nature is there, but the contextual, there are other meanings to things. And this here, I want to show you, and I'm going to highlight some reasoning as to why I'm saying what I'm saying. And here we will start with from the West. Where's the West? The West is the Western influence, the bit of colonization, and it's saying the Western folks came hurrying to colonize, and they say like a plague of locusts. Remember in Martin Carter's poem, "This is the dark time, my love." We see that the poet Carter described the soldiers, the British soldiers, as beetles, brown beetles. Well, here Mr. David is describing these Western influences as a plague of locusts. And is showing just how deeply he feels about this influence here. Like a madman chasing nothing. And there it shows us just how the Western world worked. Everywhere they attempted to colonize, everywhere they attempted to gain something from, like a madman chasing nothing, refusing nothing, and they're just going out trying to influence people and trying to win their country, or to claim their lands. Like dark, sinister wings having a deeper plot, a plot to colonize, a plot to gain wealth from these people. and this is the most significant part of it. Trees bend to let them pass, and this is beautiful writing. Why says trees bend to let them pass? It is as though the African people, it is as though the people of the world or of the country David is from, he is confessing to us that they did not rebuke, they did not resist the influence of this Western world, but instead they receded. Instead, they bend and allow them to pass, they bend and allow them to colonize their country. That there is interesting. And then it goes on to say, screams of delighted children. A contrast here, and I want to take it two ways. A contrast between the children and the adults, probably telling us here that some were delighted by the influence of the Western world. Some were delighted in the sense that they thought they could have benefited from this relationship. But some of them, some people might have been worried. Some people might have been darting about in and out madly. And then it says, clothes wave like tattered flags. To it tell us that the flags, literally the flags, might have been the idea of independence might have been tattered. The idea of independence might have been destroyed by the presence of this Western influence. And it says rumble, tremble, crack to tell us the effect of the presence of these Western influence, of these Western folks, the presence they had on this country, Mawali. And as they're trying to gain independence, there they were destroying that chance of them. And pelting march of the storm signifies a very important part, is telling us just how these people felt towards the Western influence, and they were as though they were marching and couldn't resist the urgency or the seriousness that this storm might have on their lives. So there we had the poem An African Thunderstorm by David Rubadiri. I keep forgetting his last name, that's why I paused a few times in the middle of saying David. I can't really get a hold on this last name here. But there we had An African Thunderstorm. Hope you enjoyed this. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think of the contextual meaning, especially. All right? Recapping, we can compare this poem to any other poem within the syllabus under the themes nature and colonization. We can take away two meanings from this poem. One, a literal meaning to show us the impact of things like hurricanes and storms on people's lives and show us just how much we might not be able to plan enough or to prepare enough to offset the impacts of those storms. Two, we can take a contextual meaning to show us the effect of colonial domination on native lands. And in this poem, we see a brilliant comparison of the Western influence to a violent and evil storm. Leave me a comment, like, and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye.